Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa, Padurjikacharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa, Padurjikacharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavini Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 23rd day of January 2023 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We're in Canto 6, Prescribed Duties for Mankind, Chapter 4, the Hangsat Guhya Prayers, text number 34. Ya Prakritaya Jnana Pataya Jananam Yatashayam dehagato vibhati yatanilaha partivam ashrito gunam sa ishvaro me kurutam manoratham yak prakritar jnanapatar jananam yatashayang dehagato vibhati yatanilak partivam ashrito gunam sa ishvaro me kurutam manoratham yak prakritar jnanapatar jananam yatashayang dehagato vibhati yatanila partivam ashrito gunam sa ishvaro me kurutam manoratham yak prakritar jnanapatar jananam yatashayang dehagato vibhati yatanilak partivam ashrito gunam sa ishvaro me kurutam manoratham yak prakritar jnanapatar jananam yatashayam dehagato vibhati yatanilak partivam ashrito gunam sa ishvaro me kurutam manoratham yak prakritar jnanapatar jananam yatashayang dehagato vibhati yatanilak partivam ashrito gunam sa ishvaro me kurutam manoratham. Let's try it. Yak prakritar jnanapatar jananam yatashayang dehagato vibhati yatanilak partivam ashrito gunam sa ishvaro me kurutam manoratham. Naveen, you want to try? yak prakritar jnanapatar jananam yatashayang dehagato vibhati yatanilak partivam ashrito gunam sa ishvaro me kurutam manoratham. Anyone on Zoom want to try?
Yes, Hare Krishna Prabhu, I would like to try. Tapas Prabhu, can you put Sanskrit down, please? Sanskrit.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, I'm going to try.
Tapas can put it up on the screen.
Yeah, Tapas Prabhu, can you put Sanskrit down? Sanskrit on, please. Thank you. Yah prakrute jnanapathe jananam
yak prakrita jnanapathe jananam
yathashayam dehagato vibhati yathanilah parthivamashrito gunam
yatanilak parthivamashrito gunam
sa ishvaro me kurutam manoratham.
Sa ishvaro me kurutam manoratham.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Bravo. Very nice. Yaha, who? Prakritahi, lower grade. Jnanapatahi, by the paths of worship. Jananam, of all living entities. Yata ashayam, according to the desire. Dehagataha, situated within the core of the heart. Vibhati, manifests. Yatha, just as. Anilaha, the air. Parthivam, earthly. Ashritaha, receiving. Gunam, the quality, like flavor and color. Saha, he, that's a capital H, he the Lord. Ishvaraha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. May, my. Kurutam, may he fulfill. Manoratam, desire. Desire for devotional service. I think we can turn this off now. It'll stay warm enough in here. Thank you. Translation. This is Daksha. I think this is winding up his prayers. As the air carries various characteristics of the physical elements, like the aroma of a flower or colors resulting from a mixture of dust in the air, the Lord appears through lower systems of worship according to one's desires, although he appears as the demigods and not in his original form. What is the use of these other forms? May the original Supreme Personality of Godhead please fulfill my desires. Purport. The impersonalists imagine the various demigods to be forms of the Lord. For example, the Mayavadis worship 5 demigods, Panchopasana. They do not actually believe in the form of the Lord, but for the sake of worship, they imagine some form to be God. Generally, they imagine a form of Vishnu, a form of Shiva, and forms of Ganesh, the sun god, and Durga. This is called Panchopasana. Daksha, however, wanted to worship not an imaginary form, but the supreme form of Lord Krishna. In this regard, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes the difference between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and an ordinary living being. As pointed out in a previous verse, Sarvam puman veda gunangs tadgyo na veda sarva gyamanantam ide. The omnipotent, notice the pronunciation, the omnipotent Supreme Lord knows everything. But the living being does not actually know the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, I know everything, but no one knows me. This is the difference between the Supreme Lord and an ordinary living being. In a prayer in Srimad Bhagavatam, Queen Kunti says, My dear Lord, you exist inside and outside, yet no one can see you. The conditioned soul cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead by speculative knowledge or by imagination. One must therefore know the Supreme Personality of Godhead by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He reveals himself, but he cannot be understood by speculation. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 10.14.29, Atapite deva padamba jadvaya pasada lesha nugrihita evahi janati tattvam bhagavan mahimno dachane eko pichadam pichinban. This is Lord Brahma speaking. My dear Lord, if one is favored by even a slight trace of the mercy of your lotus feet, he can understand the greatness of your personality. But those who speculate to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead are unable to know you, even though they continue to study the Vedas for many years. Close quote. This is the verdict of the Shastra. An ordinary man may be a great philosopher and may speculate upon what the absolute truth is, what his form is, and where he is existing. But he cannot understand these truths. Sevonmukhe jihvādau svayam sphuraty adaḥ. One can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead only through devotional service. This is also explained by the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself in the Bhagavad Gita 18:55. Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavanyas chasmi tatpataha. Quote, one can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead as he is only by devotional service. Close quote. Unintelligent persons want to imagine or concoct a form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but devotees want to worship the actual personality of Godhead. Therefore, Daksha prays, one may think of you as personal, impersonal, or imaginary, but I wish to pray to your Lordship that you fulfill my desires to see you as you actually are. Close quote. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments that this verse is especially meant for the impersonalist, who thinks that he himself is the Supreme because there is no difference between a living being and God. The Mayavadi philosopher thinks that there is only one Supreme Truth and that he is also that Supreme Truth. Actually, this is not knowledge but foolishness, and this verse is especially meant for such fools whose knowledge has been stolen by illusion, maya padita jnana. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that such persons, jnani manina, think themselves very advanced, but actually they are unintelligent. Okay, I'm going to put a little heads up over there. In regard to this verse, Srila Madhvacharya says, Swadehastam harim prahu adama jivam evatu madhyamas chapya nirnitam jivad binnam janardanam. There are three classes of men: the lowest, adama, those in the middle, madhyama, and the best, uttama. The lowest, adama, think that there is no difference between God and the living entity, except that the living entity is under the designations, whereas the absolute truth has no designations. In their opinion, as soon as the designations of the material body are dissolved, the jiva, the living entity, will mix with the Supreme. They give the argument of gatakasha, patakasha, in which the body is compared to a pot with the sky within and the sky without. When the pot breaks, the sky inside becomes one with the sky outside, and so the impersonalists say that the living being becomes one with the Supreme. This is their argument. But Srila Madhvacharya says that such an argument is put forward by the lowest class of men. Another class of men cannot ascertain what the actual form of the Supreme is, but they agree that there is a Supreme who controls the activities of the ordinary living being. Such philosophers are accepted as mediocre. The best, however, are those who understand the Supreme Lord, Satchid Ananda Vigraha. Purnanandadi Gunakam Sarva Jiva Vilakshanam. His form is completely spiritual, full of bliss, and completely distinct from that of the conditioned soul or any other living entity. Uttamastu Harim Prahus Taratam Yena Teshucha. Such philosophers are the best because they know that the Supreme Personality of Godhead reveals himself differently to worshippers in various modes of material nature. They know that there are 33 million demigods just to convince the conditioned soul that there is a supreme power and to induce him to agree to worship one of these demigods so that by the association of devotees he may be able to understand that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Mattak paratadang nanyat kinchadasti dhananjaya. There is no truth superior to me. Aham adihi devanam. I am the origin of all the demigods. Aham sarvasya prabhava. I am superior to everyone, even Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and the other demigods. These are the conclusions of the Shastra, and one who accepts these conclusions should be considered a first-class philosopher. Such a philosopher knows that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Lord of the demigods. Deva Deveshwaram Sutram Anandam Pranavedinaha. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So in the practice of devotional service, it is said that the first necessity is shraddha, faith. In Rupa Goswami's famous ladder from faith to prema, he begins with faith, adaḥ shraddha. And Prabhupada makes it clear that this shraddha is distinct from the shraddha mentioned later in this ladder, which is actually called nishtha. But shraddha has to be there, meaning that one has to suspend his disbelief. There's a suspension of disbelief. Or put in the back burner one's convictions, however nebulous they may be, that there is a God who has no form, or I'm God, or there's no God, or all these different things that one may cycle through one's brain as one proceeds in this material world. Not enough faith in order to come into the association of devotees. And actually the most important aspect of that, coming into the association of devotees, is to hear the absolute truth from a real practitioner. Now, we have classes here, and we also have classes at night and so forth, and we're hearing the truth. But it's not coming from the lips of a pure devotee. But, as Prabhupada made very clear, if we're simply repeating what we've heard from Srila Prabhupada, or what we've read in his books, and especially if someone is reading Srila Prabhupada's books, they're getting the absolute truth direct from a pure devotee. And that, being open or receptive to that is an essential first qualification. That's why Krishna says, where is it, the end of the 4th chapter? Slay these doubts, get up and fight. You see? So the hesitancy to serve Krishna, which is preceded by the critical factor of believing in God, believing in Krishna, the hesitancy to actually take up the process of devotional service is due to doubts. They come in the form of some conviction you have that you heard. You can be encased in a whole set of beliefs, which is basically atheism. Or as here, we've been dealing with the Mayavadis. Where did the Mayavadis get their ideas? From other Mayavadis. In other words, they heard from that, and it was very, authoritatively presented, and so they believe this katakas patakas, that we are also Supreme Brahman, and when we die, if we're in right frame of mind, if we've fixed our mind on the absolute truth in impersonal form, then we'll merge. That's their conviction, And it is possible to merge, but not permanently. This is in Yenyeda Bindaksha Vimuktamaya. Prabhupada quote this verse constantly. They get demigods praying for Krishna in the womb, and they're saying, besides the devotees, O lotus-eyed Lord, there are others, Anye, who are averse to you serving your lotus feet. Their intelligence is not pure. They haven't purified themselves by the process of bhakti, so they have all of these wrong ideas. And these are the impersonalists. Now, there's no Mayavadis back in 5,000 years ago, but there are those who prefer the Supreme Brahman rather than personality. And these actually, they can be, the Shukadeva was one of them, and so were the 4 Kumaras. So when they come in touch with genuine bhakti, and they're fortunate, in the case of the Kumaras, they came directly in touch with Vishnu, and the fragrance of the tulsi, they always say tulsi leaves, but I think it may be the manjaris, which are more fragrant, right? Anyway, the tulsi flower with the leaves, they changed. They were no longer Brahmavadis. They were devotees. And they lamented this wonderful prayer where they said, we're certainly headed toward hell, but we pray that please let our words be like the tulsi being offered to you, let our ears be fulfilled by hearing about you, like that. So, this faith is so important, and the receptivity, it begins with at least suspension of disbelief, willing to investigate, willing to associate. That's preliminary, willing after, you got a book back in 2017, and you put it on your shelf, and it's been sitting there, and finally something happens in your life where you get curious. What is that Bhagavad Gita? What is that Science of Self-Realization book? It's been sitting there. You blow off the dust and you open it up, and as soon as you do that, you're getting the association with the pure devotee in the most important way, through the words. That's the most important way, and it's always available. Whereas the vapu is not available. The body is, personal. So that's wonderful for the time you can get it, and we should always take advantage. But the association with the words is the most important, and our attitude toward those words. That's why in that song we sing, the Guru Puja song, I regard the most important line is Guru Mukha Padma Vakachita Tekarayaka Arnakade Monayasha. Prabhupada would ask sometimes, they would say, what does it mean? Do you know what the song means? Some would be usually have one devotee who would be able to explain it, at least. So Guru Mukha Padma Vakya, the words emanating from the lotus mouth of the Guru. I pray, I changed it, I edited it, the song. Now we should understand about that editing, First of all, this is not Prabhupada's translation. He didn't give the translation to the song. That was done by his Bengali students, those who had learned some Bengali. And the translation we have also went through some iteration, you know. But really what it means is, Guru Mukha Panachita Tekara Arnaka, that the lotus, may the words emanating from the lotus mouth of the Guru be one with my heart. Actually, it's Narottam is enjoining us. It says, it's imperative. Make the words emanating from the lotus mouth of the spiritual master one with your heart, and don't desire anything else. Now you can see how that's a symptomatic of serious surrender, not to desire anything else, you know, and also to take them in and act on them. So you're not going to find that among someone first coming in contact with devotional service, but the willingness to read and hear and to be inquisitive. We'll get online, come to a temple, somehow to pursue the knowledge and not just think, well, that's interesting, then let me go into something else. So this purport is directed a lot toward the impersonalist. He's describing this this panchalpasana, but it's really it's not worship in the sense that we do it. You know, it's kind of, okay, we need to have this ritual of worship, so we'll worship these 5 demigods. Vishnu is amongst them, is not really a demigod, but they regard him as a demigod. And eventually we'll give it up. You know, it's important the worship is important to concentrate our mind and so forth, you know, but ultimately we don't believe really that, you know, that we're, you know, we need to do that. And ultimately we just want to merge and go into the Brahman. Now for a devotee, the very idea of doing that is hellish. You know that verse from Prabodhananda Saraswati, you know that verse. Kaivalyam nadakayate. Yeah, he goes through, this is a very nice verse, Prabhupada will quote it often. He goes through different categories of people who are not devotees, and he dismisses one after another. The first is Kaivalyam nadakayate. Now, what is he describing here? Oftentimes, to really get the import of a verse, you go to the end, the last line. And what the last line is those who, Sri Chaitanya, how's it go? Kaivalyam Tridashapura Kasha Pushpayade Durdanda Vishwan Purna Sukayate Vidamin Yet Karunya Kataksha Vaibhavatam Tam Gaurame Vastamar. So I worship Lord Gaur, Lord Chaitanya. This is the Chaitanya Chandramrita. It's a beautiful book. I made a recording of it. And so the last line says, those who have been empowered by the merciful sidelong glance of Lord Chaitanya, they have these attitudes, they have this consciousness. He lists them one after another. And it's very systematic. First he deals with the Mayavadis. Kaivalyam means merging into the Brahman, nadakayate. It's just like hell for a devotee. Why? Because there's no possibility of bhakti. To have bhakti you need Bhagavan, you need the bhakta, the devotee, and you need the process of devotional service. There's none of that in the Brahman. Nirvishesha. There's no details, there's no bodies, there's no rasa, there's no nothing. All it is conscious beauty. It's made up of like billions and billions of little jivas without bodies. That's the Brahman. You want to join them? I mean, we want ears and fingers to chant japa, and feet to dance, right? And tongues to taste the prasadam. You know? All the senses are necessary. So that's the first statement. Tridashapura Akasha Pushpayade. This refers to the allurement of going to the heavenly planets. 33 million heavenly planets, some are very prominent, you know. And for a devotee, that's Tridashapura. Tridasha is short for 33 million, 33. Akasha Pushpa means the sky flower. Someone who aspires for a sky flower is nuts. There's no such thing, right? In other words, you're aspiring to go to the heavenly planets to be happy, but you won't be happy. That's, Krishna said, Chine Pune Macha Lokam Vishanti. You'll be happy for a while, just like you're happy here if you get, you know, your aspirations to enjoy some particular sense gratification are met, and you're in the throes of that enjoyment. Oh, I've made it, you know. But then it ends. It ends. Those who are intelligent don't take part in this sense gratification because it has a beginning and an ending. and it brings misery. Part of the misery is that it's ended. So who wants to forget about the demigods? That's another whole part of the Vedic culture, right? Worshipping hard, worshipping all these demigods. Hopefully we get good karma and go. No. Then the yogis. Durdantendriya kara sarva patadi prodkata dangstrayate. So Durdantendriya means the very difficult to control senses. We can all understand it. Durdantendriya. They're compared to poisonous serpents because they'll bite you. You'll be going along trying to chant, and then you'll see something, or in your mind's eye, you'll think of something, and you'll be off in there. The senses can take you, just like Krishna says. Like one of the senses that the mind fixes on can be like a big wind that take the boat of your consciousness off into outer space. So they're difficult to control, But the devotees it's like they have the senses. They're using the sense, but poisonous fangs have been removed. Meaning that the senses are friends because they're being used in devotional service. Our ears are our friends, not when we're listening to cinema songs, as Prabhupada would say, but when we're listening to kirtan. The eyes are our friends when we're seeing the deity. In other words, all the senses can be purified. And there's a beautiful verse in the prayers of the personified Vedas. I memorized several of them. This is the only one that's stuck so far. They're long. Twanatupatam kulayam idamat masurit priyavat Sevonmukhe tviyate priyatmanaha priyatmanicha Nabadadamandaho asadupasanayatmahano jaranushayabrame hudubahe kushadhiyapatak. It's a very instructive verse. So they're saying, my dear Lord, one of the personified Vedas, the human form of body is very suitable for serving you. And one who serves you with full devotion, then the body becomes his best friend and very dear because it's paraphernalia for service. It's not dragging you down, training your consciousness down. And as far as you're concerned, you as the super soul are very happy in that body and giving the instructions to this. Everything is very nice. But alas, nabadadamandaho asadupasanayatmahino. Those who do not take their pleasure in serving you, but try to take pleasure in the senses themselves, then they're worshiping the impermanent, asadupasanaya, mammon. We're worshiping all the things in this world that come and go. Asadupasanaya atmahano, which is equivalent to committing spiritual suicide. Atmahano. And the result is yadunushaya brahme, they wander in the material world, trying to fulfill these desires and taking on very abominable bodies. You think how wonderful the human body is, but then bodies which bring all kinds of fear. So that's the idea. So the senses, when their poisonous fangs are removed, meaning when their propensity for sense gratification is removed, and they're being used by the superior intelligence of mind of the Bhakti in serving you, then those senses are very auspicious. Then what about the demigods? No. Then he said something very interesting. Vishram Purna Sukhayate. Remember, this is all pertaining to that devotee who, as part of the Sankirtan movement, is surrendered to Lord Chaitanya and is pure devotee in the line, who had been empowered by the merciful sidelong glance of Lord Chaitanya. So he sees the whole universe as filled with joy. Well, how's that? I think Prabhupada refers to that here. How can you see that? Well, it's kind of like Prahlad Maharaj. Prahlad Maharaj says in the first half of one of his famous verses there, is that Naivod Vijay Padaduratya Vaitaranyas Tradvirya Gayana Mahamrita among the Chitta, that I'm not disturbed at all in this world. You see? There's so many disturbing things, but he proved that even when they threw him into a boiling vat of oil to kill him, he wasn't disturbed. He was so absorbed in meditating on Krishna, fully absorbed, that he was protected. His conscience was protected, his body was protected, and he wasn't freaking out. And all those other things, throwing him off a roof, crushing him under an elephant, etc. So what to speak of the ordinary ups and downs of this material world? So what's joyous about this universe? You can see the pastimes of the Lord being enacted everywhere. You can see Krishna's hand in everything, and you're always remembering his pastimes. So therefore, the whole world, you see Krishna everywhere. Your dear Lord is present, and you can see it acted, especially in the association of devotees. Just like these incredible devotees in Ukraine, going through this, those who are there or those who have taken shelter. So much suffering, but they're taking shelter of the holy name. And many of them, and they're still feeling that. Of course, it's a very trying circumstance, but it's not like they're ordinary people getting, going through the war. There's a different status. The example is, because Prabhupada was the ideal, even in the midst of the very difficult crossing he went through with the heart attacks, he still was completely absorbed in Lord Chaitanya, the lotus feet of his spiritual masters, and he went back. There's this beautiful little short movie I saw yesterday. It was put together about Prabhupada's trip to America, the first days, and then his heart attack, returned to Vrindavan. And then, he was saying how he was expecting he was going to pass away there, because he almost died in the hospital with the third heart attack. But the devotees were all writing to him so many letters, please come back, please come back. These are Prabhupada's word, please come back. So his health improved, and he came back, and you can imagine, it shows the devotees how blissful they are. So the pure devotees don't experience this world like non-devotees. It's the place where there's joy. But they see the suffering, like Prahlad says, that's where they suffer. Paradukha dukhi, very important phrase, that devotees are empathetic. Not just sympathetic, but empathetic. They're actually feeling the pain of others' pain. And that pain is because they're not Krishna conscious. So therefore, the second half of that phrase, Shochetado, Vimukachetasa Indriyata Maya Sukaya Badamudvido Vimudhan. I'm seeing these fools who have turned their face away from you and are trying to enjoy this flickering, illusory happiness. And so I have to try to help them. In the next verse he explains how. He's not going to wander off and go off to the Himalayas. It's not for his own liberation. Mukti kama, he calls it, lust for my own liberation. It's a selfish desire, if it doesn't involve helping others also. So anyway, that's the different vision of the devotee. And this verse, so Vishnu Purna Vidimahindachitakitayate, and here's the demigods, right? There's Shiva and Brahma. He mentions them. Vidi, that's Lord Brahma, and Mahendra, Indra, and others. He says they're no more. It's not that he disrespects them, although this verse may kind of give you an impression of that. But he sees them as in terms of worshipable deities, no more significant than insects. In other words, you recognize, yes, they're servants of Krishna. They're very, exalted and so forth. I respect them, but that's it. You're not going to get any prayers and anything. So this is the different attitude of the pure devotees toward all of these entities that he's mentioning here. Let's see. Prabhupada is really going into depth here about the difference between the living entity and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I know everything, but no one knows me. For extra credit, who can name that verse in the Bhagavad Gita? Vedaham tamatitani vartamani charjana bhavashani chabhutani mam tu vedana kashana. That I know past, I know present, everything that happened in the past, everything that happened in the present, everything that happened in the future. Somehow or other, this verse always, the amazing qualities of Krishna and his powers, this one always just kind of blew my mind as totally inconceivable. Everything that happened in the past, every movement of every atom, every thought that everyone had, think of that. This is real omniscience. And everything that's happening now and everything that happened in the future. But me, no one knows, he says. So this is the different, in the prayer, Queen Kunti says, Namaste Purusham Tvajam Yishanam Pakate Padam. You exist inside and outside, but no one can see you. So how can we know the Lord? Only by His mercy. That again and again we find that. That's this famous verse Prabhupada would love to quote from Brahma's prayers. Atapite deva padamrajaya prasada lesha means even just a little mercy. By your little grace, one can understand janati tattvam Bhagavan mahino. He can understand the glories of Bhagavan, the truth of the glories of Bhagavan. Not everything, but something. But others, big brains speculating, they can't understand anything. Even after cogitating for millions of years, Prabhupada says. Vichindran means studying the Vedas and everything. If they're not bhaktas, they remain bewildered. Krishna reserves the right. Naham pakasha sarvasa yogamaya samabhat. I'm not manifest to everyone. He only reveals himself to those who have bhakti, to those who have love for him. And that's again and again reiterated, of course, in the Bhagavad Gita. Bhakti aham vijanati nabanyastasmi tattvataha. One can understand me in truth only through bhakti. One can understand something about God without bhakti, but it's not in truth. It's not even approaching the full understanding of Krishna, or the full understanding that human beings can have. So that's a very important verse. This is the verdict of the Shastra, and then the famous verse is quoted in the purport in the Bhagavad Gita. Atak Shri Krishna Damadi Nabhavaigrahim Indra. With our present senses and mind, we can't understand the Lord. But if you begin serving, and you don't say. Begin serving with what sense? The tongue. Who would think? Chanting and hearing and tasting prasadam. Then you become Sevonmukhe jihvādau svayam sphuraty. The senses become purified. Krishna becomes attracted to reveal himself, and svayam sphuraty. Krishna himself reveals himself proportionately to our purity. So therefore, what's the use? You have this big brain. You know, I read this article about some famous, which I don't remember the names, and I don't want to know the names, of modern-day atheists. They make a big business, they write books, they go on TV. There's maybe a half a dozen of them who are very famous, and they have a big influence, unfortunately. It was going through each one of them and show how they're corrupt, you know. They're accused of abusing some women here, of cheating. In other words, with their atheism comes no basis for morality, right? And they get intoxicated with their fame and their wealth and everything, and they abuse their position. So that makes perfect sense. The root or the foundation of any ethics or morals is ultimately the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You may think, I could be a humanist, secular humanist, without believing in God, but it doesn't work that way. Because ultimately you encounter some situation in which you're under the different modes. You're in the mode of ignorance rather than the mode of goodness. The mode of passion with a good helping of goodness. Okay, then we can think of others' welfare and try to help materially, which is ultimately futile. But at least you're not exploiting and killing and demonic. But then the modes of nature can take over. You can become the mode of passion tinged with the mode of ignorance, in which you just think, let me grab mine and the hell with everyone else, and everything. So there's no foundation for morality. It's just like everything else. It may come and go, but if you're going to be righteous, even in great difficulty, even when you're not in a position to be someone nice and get a little charity or whatever, then that requires that you be a devotee of Krishna, a serious devotee. So that's Prabhupada's making the same point. Bhakti mama vijanati. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, it's the only way to know me. He reveals himself proportionately to the purity and sincerity of the devotee and his willingness to sacrifice for him. Let's see. Okay. The different classes of men, lowest, middle, and think that there's no difference between God and the living entity. The lowest class thinks that we are God. And what does the middle class think? Forget. He pretty much sticks with that lowest class. Okay, I think we can end here. And what is the ultimate prayer here? See, Daksha, he's praying. As I mentioned, in the prayers there's always these three elements: the obeisances, which we've had, and the glorification. We've had a lot of that. And now there's the final prayer, and that is, may he fulfill my desires. And fulfilling his desires means may he perform his service nicely. And I think that's why he got so angry with Narada, which was a mistake. You can imagine, he's got these 10,000 sons who are going to help him fulfill his mission of populating the universe, and he sends them out to perform some austerities to become fit for propagation. But what happens? Narada Muni comes and convinces him to take sannyas. And that, and Daksha is frustrated. Says, I think it's at that point that he curses. Next he has 1,000 sons, and they try to say, and they go and they also meet Narada, and he says, I think you should follow the footsteps of your elder brothers, and off they go. He says, okay, that's it. Daughters, only daughters. And the daughters of Daksha, they're not ordinary daughters. I mean, they give birth to all kinds of species, not just human beings. But he's finally allowed, able to fulfill his desires. But we should know that Krishna is very pleased. Even though Daksha had prayed to him, he was pleased with the prayers, but he was also pleased with Narada. This is the ultimate goal, that it takes in, the pure devotees. Like that. Okay, any discussion on this wonderful verse and purport?
Hare Krishna.
Hari Bol. Who's this?
Vijaya Krishna Das.
Oh, sorry. Hare Krishna, Vijay Krishna. Would you like to make a comment?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
But I can wait if a temple room devotee wants to go first.
There doesn't seem to be anyone here. Maybe your question will, inspire some other questions. Go ahead.
Oh, of course, Dravida Prabhu.
Go ahead.
Can you find again Srimad Bhagavatam 10, 14, 29, more or less in the middle?
Yeah, I see it right here.
purport?
It's here. Yeah, I see it.
Can you recite it again?
Athapite deva padambajadvaya prasada leshanuga ite hevahi janati tattvam bhagavan mahimno nachaneko pichadam vichinvan.
And the translation, please.
May, my Lord, if one is favored by even a slight trace of the mercy of your lotus feet, he can understand the greatness of your personality. But those who speculate to understand the Supreme Lord are unable to know you, even though they continue to study the Vedas for many years.
Thank you, Prabhu. You're very kind. Based on this text, my question is, if the speculative method for us to study the Vedas is not recommended, how should we study the Vedas?
We should study the Vedas, study the cream of the Vedas, the Srimad Bhagavatam, and the other books that we've been given, at the feet of the pure devotee, namely Srila Prabhupada. The whole idea is that if we try to read the Vedas ourselves, or read even the Bhagavatam without commentary, we're sure to become bewildered. There's so much mystery in there, and it seems to be inconceivable. And many even devotees, they stumble on the fifth canto, because it contradicts to what they thought they were taught in third grade about this and that. So it's all important to receive the Vedic literature from the pure devotee of the Lord. That otherwise we're sure to be bewildered. I mean, so many of us, at least I had the experience of contacting the Bhagavad Gita, which is popular, but it was just a translation with very minimal commentary. And I had no idea what to do with it. I didn't even know that it was a book, a normative book, telling you, how you should mold your life and like that. It didn't seem obvious, because there's things in the Bhagavad Gita, like 10th chapter we're reading. That whole list, many of the items I didn't even understand. So that's the answer, is that this mercy of the Lord is coming through the transparent medium of the pure devotees. And therefore, as it's coming down through parampara, we should always remember that Prabhupada, and we'd always say, I am simply delivering this message without adulteration. And that's why it's potent, because it's Krishna's message coming through me, and it's really coming. And how did he deliver it? Read the dedication to the Bhagavad Gita, dedicated to Baladev Vidyabhushan. His very name indicates his erudition. Vidyabhushan, with the ornament of Vidya. He wasn't born with that name. That was given because he was so learned. This a direct disciple of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And so which I have for my work, I have a translation, but Bhanu Swami has translated that commentary of Baladev Vijayabhushan. And we can see how Prabhupada is, he doesn't use everything in all of the commentaries, but he very much molds it. And if you really want to see where it comes out, look at I call it Chatur Shloki, or the 4 main verses of Bhagavad Gita, 10:8 to 11. And you see in that, those purports, especially the first purport, maybe the second, there are so many quotes from the Upanishads supporting the point that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God. Gopal Tapani Upanishad, they give several quotes. Where are those coming from? Prabhupada is taking those right from Baladev Vijayabhushan. So the idea is that that's how we receive the mercy of the Lord. And even if we just get a little bit, our faith in the glories of the Lord that we may hear, Prabhupada give us or some other thing, that will be, we say, okay, this is amazing, rather than, come on, are you kidding me? 16,108 wives? Yeah, right, In other words, by the influence of the pure devotee, if we're submissive, we'll at least suspend our disbelief so that we can gradually develop faith in the actual glories of the Lord. And Krishna sees that sincerity, and from within our heart he's purifying. That's what this verse, Shinvatam Sukata Krishna Punya Shavana Kirtana. In the first canto, second chapter, text 17, I think it is. Krishnvatam Sukata Krishna Punya Shavana Kirtana Gridin Taksto Yabadani Vidanoti Suditsatam. That how does one get the affinity to hear? By serving the pure devotee. That's the previous verse. So with that kataruchi, that taste to hear, then if you're actually hearing, Krishna, he's seeing, oh, this person is hearing properly, then he is purifying the heart. Vidunoti, literally cleansing. Vidunoti suritsatam of abhadras, unwanted things. Big part of which is doubts. Is cleansed, and then you get more and more realization from that. In other words, your faith is nourished by experience. When you're experiencing, that's why Prabhupada was so successful. He had such faith in the holy name. The philosophy is hard to grasp, but here just chant these simple names. And Prabhupada would chant, in Tompkins Square Park or 26 Second Avenue. And by that chanting, they'd get some experience, stay high forever. Well, this is quite an experience. Let me come back. Plus the obvious experience of the prasadam. That was Lord Chaitanya's mode of preaching on Mass. A lot of kirtan, the prasadam distribution. He wouldn't sit there. There's no microphones. But anyway, he would just sit there and give a lecture. You don't see that in his tour of South India. He's chanting, and there's all these festivals. So that was Prabhupada's point, and that nourishes your experience, and nourishes your faith, and then you can begin to understand. Krishna allows us; he reveals, and he gives you faith in the Bhagavan Mahimno, the glories of Bhagavan, make perfect sense. It's not that you hear it and say, "Yeah, right," And you go, no, you actually think, oh yeah, it could be true, because it's giving you that faith from in the heart. So that's my understanding of how that works, Prabhu.
Yes, some people find it difficult to, how is it possible for Krishna to present his universal form to Arjuna? Yeah,
the universal form, and anything about God. I mean, it comes down to the point, I'm telling you, I saw this incredible thing that thousands of churches are closing up every year in America. There's a big fall off in people's, like that we heard yesterday, you were talking about the Pope and his friend, the other Pope, How is that supposed to nourish faith that this person is godly? And more than that, the corruption in the churches, and the whole thing is just it's dissolving. It's part of the information overload. Anyway, it's just a modern phenomenon, and this movement, which is giving devotion and bhakti and the realization of God in truth, is there. These are our people. People who had an inclination to believe, but they were discouraged from, they don't want to be part of the organized religion as they grew up with it, And the movement is filled now, the old devotees who left that. I told once about this one lady who was a nun, literally a nun, and it wasn't satisfying her questions about the activities of God. No, she wasn't getting enough information about really who God was. So she was receptive to getting some literature, this is in New York, I think. And unlike many, the four regulations were one of her things why she was excited about joining, investigating. That was an attractive feature for her, because that's what she's already doing in the nuns. And she became a very important member of the crew that produced us CC in the fifth canto in 1975. She would transcribe all night. That's what it took. To transcribe all the elements. Yeah, there's a lot of sacrifice. I participated, but it was ecstatic. But I didn't have to do that. When I came in on it. So that's the idea is that religion, all of this, false gods and false religion, they fall by the wayside. But the genuine article goes on and continues to attract sincere devotees. And Krishna is revealing himself in that way. Okay, we got...
Dravida Prabhu, just a side note. Is it that Vijay Prabhu is already traveling related to your Gita evening classes?
Yes, he is traveling. He's in Australia and he's going to go to Europe.
So can I ask my questions now? In your evening classes, the participation by the use of our microphone.
Yes, for sure. Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Prabhu, thank you.
Yes. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hari Bol, Dhanamai.
Thank you. Quick question, Prabhu. Is that okay?
No, we're over time. Sorry.
Okay. Maybe next time.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Or
thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Friday.
Wonderful.
I'm doing Friday class now.
Okay, Prabhu, I'll definitely. Thank you so much, Haribol.
Do I have?
The title that you'd like for the class.
Oh, we're going to start doing titles?
Yeah.
I haven't thought of one. For this one?
Yeah.
I'll come up with one. Tapas always writes me.
Yeah, but I'm doing the thumbnails, so...